Okay, let's talk about how to set up a data frame. So, how to set up a data frame. When we download data, we typically do not have it in the format that we need it to. And the typical format of a data set that can be read by a statistical analysis software program is that every series or every variable has its own column. So in our data set that we are building, we have our first variable, which is country, and then we have the World Bank code for that country. Then we may have the year for which we have the observation. And then what is very important, we need to have an ID. Because every observation in a data set needs to be uniquely identifiable. And then we have our series that we typically study. So maybe we have a regional identifier. Then we may have GDP per capita, which is something that we downloaded from the World Bank. Let's call that Y. Then we have the natural resource rents. That is one variable. Let's call that NRR. Then we had the gender parity index. Let's call that GPI. And we had an indicator for poverty and many others, but that's good enough for now. So most of the time what you will build is a panel data set. And a panel data set, another word for it is a stacked time series. So most of the times you will build a panel, which is another word for it, a stacked time series. And this is how you want to build your data set. There is a stacked time series, which is the way you want to build your data set, but there are also sometimes stacked cross countries. And it will be clear when we look closer at the data set that we downloaded from the World Bank. But for now, let's just remember that when we build a data set where we have many units of observations like countries, and for each country many observations over time, so that we have a time series for each country, we stack them. So what does that mean? So let's just delete that here quickly. So let's say if we look at data, typically our first observation is in the World Bank, Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is abbreviated AFG, and then we have an observation, maybe 1960, and then we create an ID. So that could be AFG for Afghanistan 1960. That would be the idea. The region is South Asia, and then we have some observation for Y, natural resource rents, gender parity, and the poverty rate. So now we have many observations for Afghanistan, and the last one is in the year 2020. So in the first two columns nothing has changed, but now we would have here 2020, let's say. And of course we have also 61, 62, and then the last time series for Afghanistan would be AFG 2020, so that's the last identifier. And then we still have the same region, that is a fixed effect that doesn't change. And then we have again observations for GDP, natural resource rents, gender parity index, and poverty, and everything in between. So this is now essentially a time series for Afghanistan. And then we have many other countries, maybe Albania and Algeria, and then eventually we reach the last one in our data set, which is Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe has a World Bank code. Actually, it's called an Alpha 3 code, is ZWE. And then again, we begin in 1960. Then we have the identifier for this observation, which is the Alpha 3 code for Zimbabwe, and the year 1960. Zimbabwe is sub-Saharan Africa. And then we have again observations for Y, NRR, GPI, poverty. And then we have again many observations for Zimbabwe. And country code is still Zimbabwe, but now we have the year 2020. We create again a unique identifier, which is now Zimbabwe 2020, and it is still sub-Saharan Africa, and we have all our observations, and again everything in between. So now you can see that this is a stacked time series and a very specific form of a panel, which is what we want to build. So also whenever you download data, you want to make sure that if it's not downloaded as a stacked time series, that you convert it into a stacked time series. That will make building data sets much easier. So now you know what is a panel, you know what is a time series, and a panel is a stacked time series. And the last data set is what we call a cross-section. So in a cross-section, we have for every unit of observation, like a country, only one observation. Whereas in a time series, you have for one unit of observation, many observations over time. In a cross-section, you have only for each country one observation, and that is a cross-section. Later we will see that it's quite easy to convert a panel into a cross-section by using pivot tables. So for example, we could take the average of all the observations that we have for Afghanistan and for all the other countries, and we condense them all into one. So we have for each unit of observation only one observation over time, which can be the average over 10 years or 20 years. But whenever you have only one observation over time for each unit of observation, then we have a cross-section. If you have for one unit of observation, like a country, many observations over time, that is a time series. And if you stack time series, then you get a panel. Okay, so I hope that clarifies how to set up a data frame. Again, most of the time you want to build a stacked time series. And yeah, I hope that has explained it. Thank you.